Hey there, hi there, ho there. Welcome back to the Eclectic podcast. This is volume number 5. I'm Josh Holbrook. I'm sitting here with Mr. Jonathan Crass.
Hey.
And we'd just like you to sit back and relax and allow our sweet voices to fill your ear and carry you aloft to the stars to dance with unicorns on the astral plane and maybe even have communion with the Greek god Dionysus and truly revel in all things that we can't imagine in this menagerie of imagination.
Life can be beautiful. Hello, beloved listeners. Welcome back. We'd like to continue blazing a trail on our never-ending quest for knowledge and truth. I think to start off, we've both been kind of watching these videos on YouTube. It's essentially the lectures from Oxford University's philosophy course. And it kind of brings up some interesting points. Throughout a lot of the great philosophers of the past and possibly even into present time, there seems to be a resistance to new ideas and thoughts among certain sects of organized religion. Is something that a lot of the it was much more prevalent in the past. There was a lot of persecution that these great thinkers of their times faced for the things that they said.
Yeah, I think the whole concept of philosophy, the birth of philosophy in ancient Greece, it was really a new way of thinking, of rational thinking taking precedence over traditional thinking, and trying to break those bounds and really reevaluate what we know and how we know what we know, rather than just take up the mantle of traditions that have been passed on from previous generations and all that. And so it's evolved over time, of course, through classical philosophy to the early modern period, and then up and through the 20th century. But I think it's at its core, and everything we always talk about that we have in the last podcast and conversations we always have is really based in philosophy, just contemplating all these what ifs, and something that I know at least intrigues us. And I think that at its core, it's just about asking ourselves how we break free from kind of these parochial frameworks that have kind of been set in place for us. And before we really get into it, I want to kind of throw out a little disclaimer again and say that we're not trying to diss on anyone's religious views, and I'd like to stress that we're both very spiritual, and I think spirituality is very important. And I think that at the end of the day, the grand message that we'd like to offer up here is that there needs to be a union between science and spirituality, between art and technology, and between evolution and compassion. Because if we're looking at everything from a straight up like Newtonian mechanical, just real boring way, then a lack of spirituality at all. It's just a very very like prosaic and pessimistic and cynical way of looking at life, and I don't think that's right. So I just want to throw that out there and say that what we're about to discuss is not in any way dissing on that search for God or a higher power or spirituality, because I think that it's very real and important.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of rewinding a little bit, yeah, the onset of Greek philosophy was pretty much the first time in recorded history, anyway, that civilization started trying to understand the world around them, the universe, from a rational standpoint, and kind of break free from the paradigmatic thinking that was so prevalent back then. And it's like you said, what do we know? What can we know? How do we know this? It's kind of just based in concrete reality, stuff that can be proved.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, another interesting point I thought that you had was science and religion or spirituality or whatever are kind of at odds, working against each other almost, it seems right now.
Yeah.
I think that once science kind of stops trying to disprove the spiritual realm and kind of maybe work in conjunction with the possibility of that, that's when we'll really start making profound advancements.
Yeah. I agree, and I think let's kind of take a look back here and take a look, and because what's really interesting to me is like you touched on this a little bit earlier, that they're philosophers, these thinkers, whether it's persecution or just kind of social isolation, it's kind of, I mean, it's the same thing. They people that present new ideas to society and put their thoughts out there and try to really kind of usher society in a certain direction. They're often met with conflict.
Yeah.
And I think one of the best examples, and maybe I find kind of the funniest examples, is like Copernicus and Galileo in the 17th century. Galileo, I think Copernicus was really might have been the first one that really put forth publicly the idea that Earth wasn't the center of the universe, and that the sun, or the Earth rotated around the sun rather than the sun rotating around the Earth.
Yeah.
And so he was really kind of the one that put that forth. But I think Galileo might be the most famous example of suggesting that heliocentric model as opposed to the geocentric model, and that was just like a watershed moment for like progression of ideas versus religious and traditional belief systems that are entrenched within society. And Galileo, I think it was like 1633, he was brought before like the Catholic court system or whatever it was in Rome, and he was put on trial because he was suspect of heresy for suggesting that the Earth rotated around the sun. And that was like such a groundbreaking and like horrible thing for someone to say at that time, that I think he was put on house arrest I think that was the result of the trial. It was that he was put on house arrest for the rest of his life because for suggesting that the Earth rotated around the sun. And I think it's interesting because we're still kind of that same thing happens today, just under different forms.
Yeah, and maybe not quite as extreme, but there are people who are, you know, branded as heretics and you know, whatever. They are outcasts for certain ideas, and you know, take Galileo's observations back then. Now it's common knowledge here in the, you know, 21st century that
Yeah.
yeah, the Earth does revolve around the sun. We all know that. It kind of just illustrates a little bit the dangers of this kind of conflict playing out. I think it's interesting. Also, like, go forward a little bit to Boyle's work in the 17th century, I think,
Yeah.
with chemistry. Um, he basically came up with some theories about atoms, but he didn't call them atoms because that would brand you as a heathen, an atheist, and you'd be discredited if you did any work like that. And again, we know now that there is atoms, and there's, you know, subatomic levels to that, but it's just interesting to me to see. It's funny now in a way, but back then
It was
wouldn't
tragic.
be so funny if it was happening to you.
Yeah, that is interesting that they avoided maybe making public a lot of their beliefs because out of fear of, you know, character assassination, of being discredited, you know, like, and that's still something that happens today. People that upset the established order, you know, they undergo a certain character assassination. They get shamed, you know, publicly shamed and discredited.
Yep.
And it just, you know, it's been going on for hundreds of years. But you were right when you said that it's not as bad as it used to be, and that is a bright spot. You know, it is more open-minded than it used to be. You know, back then it was really just extremely puritanical, but there's still traces of that today. There still are a lot of sects of certain religions that kind of behave that way and persecute people, and it's fading out, but it still concerns me, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make. That it's still very concerning to me that with the access to information we have today, that people still kind of, some people still have this like suspension of reason when it comes to a lot of topics, and they're either like afraid to touch on it, afraid to get into that conversation, or they you know, they'll resort to these kind of ad hominem attacks on you if you try to provoke that dialogue.
Yeah. Resorting to, you know, straw man arguments, or even weaker arguments like name calling and you know.
Yeah.
Which is essentially what happened to those philosophers and great thinkers of their time. They didn't have any retort or any kind of theories of their own to explain away why they were wrong. They're just like, oh, this person's an atheist.
Yeah, it's the devil.
They're a heathen. Yeah.
It's the devil.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, that's the best you got?
Yeah, I know, right?
I don't know.
And see, that's the type of stuff that still happens today, is like totally avoiding the topic, avoiding engaging in a debate, a rational thinking debate. It's all about just, well, screw you, you're a Satanist, you know, the devil has you, that type of thing. You know, like, that's just filth, that's Satan's fucking message, or whatever it is. Like, they'll just totally discredit you without ever really getting into the rational side of the argument or listening to what you're actually saying, because they have that exactly, they have no retort.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to kind of draw some parallels here with well, I guess this is kind of related, but kind of a different subject here. But I think that we've talked about in previous podcasts how we find a lot of truth in the Bible and certain religions and spiritualities, but most of the truth is probably meant to be allegorical and taken as as a metaphor, symbolic for a greater truth,
Yeah.
rather than be interpreted literally. And there's as far as just like mainstream Christianity goes in America, there's a real resistance to that line of thought for the most part. Just mainstream churches. And I kind of like to kind of make the point that most mainstream Christians already do interpret a lot of the Bible to be allegorical, in a certain sense.
Well, whether knowingly or not, I would totally agree. I find a lot in some of the theological debates I've gotten in over the years, because I know the Bible very well. I venture to say, as well as most people who haven't gone to like preschool or whatever,
Yeah, gone to a seminary or something.
Yeah. And yeah, I've got some unique ideas, I think, on the Bible in particular, and I've been in a lot of theological debates, and something that I've come across a lot is a lot of these people, not all of them. I mean, I've had some very constructive talks with other people too. That it's just interesting to me. I don't get all up in arms and offended talking with people about this kind of stuff because it's just interesting to me. But something I have come across is that a lot of these people will claim that the Bible is meant to be taken literally,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
But only when it suits their argument. And then if you bring up a passage that is obviously meant to be taken metaphorically, then they'll switch gears and oh yeah, well that one's meant to be metaphorical. It's like, well, which is
kind of hypocritical, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think if you bring that up to some religious folks, you might kind of back them into a corner, because I don't think they'll necessarily want to discuss it, but like there's certain verses here that I think are kind of examples of like, well, do you really believe this? Do you believe this literally? If I was in a debate with somebody like that, and I think I'd maybe point out in the book of Chronicles, chapter 16, Psalm 104, basically they're both saying that, for example, the earth is stable, shall not be moved. The earth is set in its foundations and can never be moved. This is basically saying, that the earth is the center of the universe and does not move. And this is where like Galileo came into conflict and caused a lot of controversy, because his suggestion that the earth rotated around the sun was contrary to this religious traditional belief. And that's just one example, but there's a lot more that I find are kind of barbaric, and I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time in church ever really, so I don't really know how literally like a lot of these Old Testament stories and messages are taken, but like, let's see here, like 1 Samuel, there's reference to where God kind of instructed an enemy of his people or whatever, or instructed someone that was faithful to him to go to his enemies and kill the men, women, children, and infants. Kind of ties,
wipe them out.
Yeah, or like the Passover thing, right? Where didn't like all the firstborn children of Egypt get killed or something, or telling Abraham to like sacrifice Isaac, and stuff like that. There's, let's see here, this is, I think Peter's the New Testament, right? First Peter.
Yeah.
His direction is that it's basically condoning slavery. It says slaves need to be subject to their masters with, holy reverence, and not only to good masters, but even those who are perverse. Or here's right back to the beginning almost, Exodus 21. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, she will not be freed after 6 years as men's slaves are. And if she doesn't please the man who bought her, he may allow her to be bought back again. Like, is that really like a sound message? I mean, that's so barbaric to me. Leviticus 10, chapter 10, the sons of Aaron burned the wrong type of incense during their worship, so God burns them alive, burns them to death. 2 Kings, Elisha caused down a curse on some kids, basically, that were making fun of him, and a bear comes out of nowhere and mauls 42 of the kids. Is that meant to be taken literally?
No.
You know what? I guess that's kind of my point with these examples, is just, what's up with that, I guess, basically, is what I'm saying. What's up with those verses? How come you're not taking those literally? And if you do take them literally, that's kind of a scary notion.
Yeah. One thing I would say, and one of those verses was from the New Testament, but we got to keep in our minds they did live in a different time. Slavery didn't really disappear until the last couple hundred years, and it could be argued that there's still slavery today.
Yeah.
With the sex trade and even slavery to corporations. But I think a lot of that more barbaric stuff you see in the Old Testament and stuff is a result of people's kind of more barbaric way of life and primitive understanding back then.
Yeah.
And New Testament, all of a sudden Christ comes along and changes the whole game, speaking a message of love and forgiveness and peace. And he was the new covenant. At least that's how it's supposed to be taken. His laws now abolish all that other stuff and override it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, none of these examples that I just put out there, none of those can be reconciled with the message of Christ.
No.
But it's funny that they're in the same book.
Yeah. Well, it just goes back to the same thing we always talk about. Religions are man-made. They are fallible. Like it or not, they are fallible. They are written by men. They might be divinely inspired, but still written by men who have faults and prejudices and misgivings, misunderstandings. It's just kind of goes with the territory, I guess. We kind of do the best with what we have, I guess. And I don't know. I think the responsibility ultimately lies with the people of today to evaluate what they believe is right and not just accept everything that is told to them as the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, kind of case in point, I guess. summarize all that, whether it be religion or politics or current affairs, whatever. The pathway to intellectual and spiritual growth, I think the first step on that is kind of being humble and admitting how little we know, and from there can maybe kind of start to figure stuff out, the truth, not just stuff that people tell you or that it's more comfortable to believe. And there are obstacles to overcoming that.
Yeah. I think kind of a common obstacle in maybe arriving at a new perspective or whatever. Whatever it is, yeah, like you said, whether it's religious or political or just whatever it is, there's kind of a common obstacle is kind of this anti-intellectual pride that is pretty widespread in, I think, certain communities, certain areas, certain social circles. I'm not sure the best way to characterize these like social circles that are very anti-intellectual, or at least take pride in being anti-intellectual and promote anti-intellectualism. Maybe like religious extremists and maybe kind of rural kind of country types, kind of like blue collar communities. There definitely seems to be kind of an aversion to real like intellectual like thinking or question asking. And I think that when you bring up deeper issues like this, and deeper issues that might reflect problems and questions for all of society, I think that with these anti-intellectual people that I'm talking about, I think that that pride and that tradition that they have and kind of their set ways, I think that you're often going to be met with kind of like platitudes, like just empty platitudes, and they're not going to look at it in like a pragmatic way. And I think to be, in their eyes, for you to be erudite is kind of to have like a foreign threatening quality about you, like some nefarious agenda or something that's gonna maybe upset their kind of established way of living, and they view it as a threat. To be knowledgeable and educated about the world is almost like an act of treason to their kind of their little club.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like you bring up kind of deeper subjects that might raise questions to not only their way of life but society as a whole. They tend to take it as a attack. They feel threatened, so they kind of in a way seem to project that onto you. And make you into the threat.
Yeah, make you outcast. Yeah, and I mean, I understand kind of where they're coming from on like a base level, because in a way, I think embracing like an intellectual and spiritual like journey and like a quest for evolution as an individual, it kind of will supplant the traditional way that that you've been raised, to a certain extent. And I think that exactly they're clinging to the old way,
Mm-hmm.
rather than embracing the new way, the new possibilities. And I'm not trying to diss on anybody, but it's like I think we all need to just stop trying to cling to the old, and really open ourselves up to the new, because that's the only way that anything ever gets any better. Situations progress through change, and it's resistance to change that I think is the key there.
Yeah, and it kind of doesn't bode well from an evolutionary standpoint, because according to Darwin, it's not the strongest species or the most intelligent that survives, it's the most adaptable to change. And it seems that a lot of people, that's kind of what living in the now and living in the truth is about, is just kind of rolling with the change. Because you can't fight it. You can't fight it. And it doesn't bode well from an evolutionary standpoint that we have all these, strongholds, people holding out and just clinging to these old ideals.
Well, they're fighting a losing battle any way you look at it.
Yeah.
They can only hold on to those ideals for so long. I mean, you can stockpile guns and ammo and board yourself in, with your cowboy hat on, and hold all these prejudices and this hold on to your xenophobia, but it's it's to no end. It really is to no end, because the world is going to change over time. There, it's just I think that maybe people like us need to kind of help them see that what they're trying to hold on to, that's not going to ever come to fruition. It's not going to get them anywhere, but into a lonely and painful place, at the end, because they are going to lose everything. We all are, in a certain way. In the material sense, we are going to lose everything, and so we need to stop trying to place this this idea of permanence, on impermanent things. The only thing that is permanent really is kind of your own. It's within you. It's kind of like the mind, the spirit, those types of things. Your true self, not like this material, social, like these material social divisions that we place, among different groups of people. That's impermanent, like it's going to transform over time. It's a transient idea.
Yep. Yeah, it's just like, I don't know, the landscape of the earth is ever changing. The ideas that people possess on the earth are ever changing. That's the one constant. It's kind of a bit of an oxymoron, is that the only constant in the universe is change.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very poignant, though.
And it's interesting to me, it goes back to the whole philosophical thing we were talking about earlier at the beginning of the podcast. People clinging to these ideas and stuff, when looking back on that stuff, it's all laughable now. Like, I wonder what people are accepting as pure concrete fact. It's not debatable, non-negotiable now, that people are going to
Yeah.
be looking back on in 200-300 years and be like, what the fuck were they thinking?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's interesting to contemplate. I think that point you just brought up, though, that the only constant is change. I think that's really important. The only thing that hasn't changed throughout history is that change is inevitable. You know, the only sure thing is uncertainty.
Yeah.
That's the only certain thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that things that we're going to be looking back on now, I mean, it's hard for even, like, it's hard for me to even think about, like, I'm not really sure. I mean, I think a lot of our laws that are trying to govern, like, personal choices that have no effect on anybody else except one individual.
Mm-hmm.
I think any laws that kind of try to dictate that, those are going to be done away with over time and shamed. But I'm sure there's a lot of things about our current form of society.
Well, hopefully those things will be done away with. That's what I would envision as one of the next steps of progression of society.
Hopefully war. That's the big one. Hopefully someday war will be like a complete, like, just abhorrent, loathsome concept of the past that, you know, it's not even to, you know, people won't even speak of it. You know, like, war. Why would anyone fucking go to war? That should be how it's always been. But, you know, I think we're just now at that point to where maybe we can start making progress towards that goal. It's a long way off.
Yeah, and what kind of is a little discouraging. I mean, I hope for that, and I try not to focus on negative things. But back to the laws and restrictions on individuals, it kind of seems like right now there's a big push for things going the other way. The people who are holding out and trying to resist the change seem to be winning a little bit right now. Hopefully things change quickly, because I don't see how much longer it can go on. But look at the NSA, you know, monitoring of phone calls and just stuff that's being passed in Congress, bills and everything every day that are just ridiculous and taking away more and more freedoms. And also on the war subject, the military budget is increasing exponentially year to year.
Yeah.
It's far and away our government's biggest expense. And, you know, it just, that kind of doesn't bode well for the evolution of society.
Yeah, I agree. And like we touched on it in a previous podcast, I think that my great hope for that is that it kind of dies off with as the next generation kind of assumes control. We'll see, but I think that it's funny when a lot of people kind of, you know, damn government, these taxes and all that, and they'll, you know, name drop a couple like a food stamps program or something like no, like, fucking all of our budget basically is military. It's like goes into funding war and like military, like arms contractors and all that type of shit. Like so much of it's built on war. So much of society is built on the activity of you know, policing other parts of the world in a way, and that is that definitely is kind of a big red flag, you know, like for measuring the direction that we're headed in.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as war goes and all that, I think that maybe one way it would be kind of like a peaceful, natural progression to kind of rein in the powers that be in the way that they're exploiting like America's economic and military resources to kind of um, further their own ends would be for, since we have like an all volunteer military, like if there's a change in consciousness in the people and people stopped enlisting in the military, I think that would be an extremely like strong message to send um, towards the leaders and people in positions of power. If people stopped enlisting in the military and said, "No, fuck you guys, we're not going into your little club, into your military, your dog and pony show," then that would it would cause a debate to occur in this country. I think like they're gonna say no one's gonna sign up for the military until we reevaluate the way that we're to reevaluate our foreign policy and the way we're taking actions all across the world and kind of and utilizing the the massive like resources that we have as Americans. And I think that would bring about a dialogue that the entire country, everyone could be involved in, and maybe arrive at kind of a new way of operating, and kind of put in place a more peaceful paradigm going forward. So I guess the point would be that like we're not gonna play this game anymore until we change the rules.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, it's kind of like, what can we do at this point? That seems like one of the only effective strategies that I've heard thus far. But something has to give. Something has to change.
Take the pawns off the board, and it'll change the game.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on this whole NSA, CIA surveillance issue?
I think it's a crock of shit.
Yeah.
I think that they've way overstepped their bounds, these government agencies. They've either straight up violated the Constitution or just sneakily passed some bill in one of their 1,000-page, laws that get passed in the Congress and Senate and whatever. But obviously, with the backlash that the whistleblower Snowden has received, they did something wrong, and
Yeah.
they're uncomfortable. That's why he needs to receive some kind of recompense.
I think so, but again, it goes back to character assassination.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they can't find the guy right now, or maybe it's become too public for them to just off him somehow. So what they do, the next best thing, and assassinate his character, discredit him, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us to write to our Congress people and tell them that we're not standing for this shit. Like the NSA now, like there's I was just reading about some program that like literally every computer that's connected to the internet, not only is every email that you send, every website that you visit, all that being recorded, they're actually recording now all of your keystrokes on the computer. So literally anything you type on your computer is being recorded in their database. And there's still this sentiment in the mainstream media, and probably for a good portion of people, that will what are you hiding? If you don't have anything to hide, what are
Yeah.
you worried about? Well, I mean, it's not. I mean, I think it's plain to see for an irrational person how fascist and Nazi-esque that this is.
Yeah, yeah, and it's fucked up, you know.
Yeah,
Like,
there needs to be more of an uproar among the people.
and most people, I would think that that we're talking about that, you know, what are you hiding and stuff. That have that mentality, their tune would change pretty quickly when they're brought in for something that they inadvertently, some sequence of keys that they typed, or maybe as a joke. You know, I say a lot of things in jest that
Yeah.
if
Oh, we
certain
both do.
government agencies heard it, I'd be black-bagged and shipped off to Guantanamo
Yeah.
in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And it's just a joke, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna hurt anybody, but it might make some people nervous, you know. And
Yeah.
it makes me nervous that all this shit's going on because
Well, basically, with that,
I'm not squeaky clean.
with this complete exhaustive invasion of privacy, the government basically now has the tools to paint any individual in any fucking way that they want.
Yeah.
So if you cross them for whatever reason, they have all the ammunition they need to put you away.
Exactly. It's and they could even just drum it up, make straight up just conjure shit up out of the blue, just make stuff up about you.
Yeah. And, you know, there's just not an outroar from the public. So it just continues the same way. That's why it's incumbent upon us to, like, write your Congress people when the elections come around, like, forget the mainstream Democrat and Republicans, like, elect
It's
people.
way beyond that.
Yeah, elect the people that are not going to put up with this type of fucking surveillance on the American people. Like, only elect people that will do that and hold them to their word. If they don't stand up and maintain the policies that they said they would during the election cycle, then they're boot their ass out then the next fucking time the election happens.
Yeah.
You know, I
straight
think
up impeach their asses.
yeah, and I mean, either way, like make it known to the leaders and politicians that you will be held accountable to what you say on the election circuit. Like, you're gonna go in there and you're gonna do what you said you were gonna do, or you're gonna fucking get out. And there's just not that outcry
Yeah.
from the public, so it hasn't occurred yet.
And there definitely should be. Something I just thought of that's maybe kind of encouraging, actually, back to the what we were talking about earlier with the progression of society and our governing bodies and all that stuff. It's pretty apparent that there's something making these powers that be nervous when they're starting to implement all these new measures and trying to control everything. It's because they know that they are so outnumbered, and what they're doing is forcing us back into a corner where it's going to get to a point where something's got to give, you know?
Yeah.
Like, they are inadvertently fanning that fire, and
Mm-hmm.
something's going to happen. They're backed into a corner, they're backing us into a corner. Something's got to give, and they are vastly outnumbered.
Yeah.
And you can tell that they are spooked.
Yeah, and you know, again, we can do this peacefully.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm not condoning any violence or anything.
It's it would be it'd be pointless to supplant the current power structure in a violent way, because it would then become the same thing. You know, to quote the old Who song, the adage, you know, the new boss is the same as the old boss. We have to avoid that.
Yep.
And we can do this peacefully, and it requires cooperation among people, open-mindedness, and like all the things we've been talking about. Like, we can accomplish like great fucking things as the human race, but we have to come together, and we have to come together in peace to accomplish those things. And we just have to get rid of these old traditions and frigging prejudices and put all that crap behind us. It's time to do that. It's time now. The 21st century, it's time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, if we overthrow it with violence, it'll just be more of the same. That's not at all what I'm condoning. I'm just trying to illustrate the point that they're freaked
the
out.
levity of the fucking, yeah, the importance of this coming moment that's probably soon. The critical mass that's coming.
Yeah. And it's being accelerated by the powers that be. And they probably don't realize that that's what they're doing, and they're trying to take measures to prevent that. But in so doing, they're just pushing it towards the inevitable moment in time where it comes to a head. And I hope that it doesn't end in violence.
Yeah.
And I know that it can be achieved without violence. But, it's just...
Well, you know what? If it does happen peacefully, it'll be the first time in human history. Because it always has been done in violence. And that's exactly the point, I guess, is that it's time to change.
Yeah.
Now's the time to fucking put that shit behind us.
Yeah. Gotta put it to rest. Because things can't carry on under the same old model anymore. It's played out. It's getting to a point where we will bring about widespread destruction, possibly extinction, if we keep trying to do things that same old way.
Yeah, it's like our technology has exceeded our morality in a way. Our imagination has exceeded our compassion.
Yeah.
How much time we have left?
Like 10 minutes. Yeah, 10 minutes.
Well, maybe we start kind of wrapping this up. I know that we're hoping to get a guest on here real soon. Hopefully the next one. If not the next one, then probably the one after that. So we're get a hold of us if you want to be on here. We're really hoping that out of the next several podcasts, most of them will be with guests. So
yeah, that's kind of what this has been gearing up towards. Is sometimes we don't have a guest. For the first couple weeks, I think kind of just wanted to do it just you and I, but now we've got some people who reached out to us, some people we have in mind, and we'll probably start rolling with that. We do this about once or twice a week. So get at us. It's one of our favorite pastimes now. It's no hassle. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to pick your brain, hear what you have to say.
Yep. And I think it's enjoyable. I think it's enjoyable to have these types of conversations, and if you're kind of riding the fence and you're not sure about it, I think you'll have a good time. You learn something about yourself in discussion with others.
Yep. That's kind of the point, I'd venture to say.
Well, it's been fun talking.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
We'll see you on the other side.